I would imagine. It's still That was a weird drop.
Right? Oh, hallelujah. Thank God. If Liam likes this, I don't know. I'm like, but I thought it was a great movie. I was expecting to go with Barry.
I will.
Are you talking about LXG? Oh, I believe it's Dog Park. I thought about the Brutalist. So long. I don't even want to talk about this movie.
Coming to you live from the offices of Chapter 1 Films in Charlotte, North Carolina, this is the 4D Podcast with your hosts, Nathanael Levinson, Greg Prinz, and Liam Maxwell. A new dimension in entertainment. This is the 4D Podcast.
Dun.
I don't want to talk about this movie.
Wake up, Nathaniel. We're back.
I'm not asleep. I don't want to talk about
Wake
this
up,
movie.
Nathaniel. We're back. I can't wait to talk about this movie. There's so much to talk about.
And all of it bad.
I feel like if you like it or don't, there is a lot to talk about.
Okay. There's certainly
Right?
things to talk about. I just don't want to talk about it. I want to move on and pretend I never watched that movie.
Okay.
It felt like a waste of 4 hours of my life.
There was definitely a lot of weirdness in that movie. I don't think Liam can deny that.
I'll tell you, I was with it for the first half. I was like, okay, there's some interesting things. I'm not like, it's not hooking me, but there's some interesting things. And then the second half was like, I didn't need to see any of that.
I'm curious to know what the weird
And then
things
the prologue,
because
honestly, the epilogue was what ruined it for me.
understandable.
Like, completely ruined it. I was like, this
Understandable.
is incredibly important information that I feel like you didn't give me any of it, and that would have really made a difference to how I'm watching this movie.
That's the thing I can potentially concede.
Oh my goodness.
Potentially,
But I don't think it was as bad. That's like the discourse amongst the film community is people love the movie, but the epilogue took them out of it.
Yeah,
That's like a common theme.
It was so odd.
so anxious to hear you defend this movie.
Yeah.
No, I mean,
I'll try. I'll do my
the
best.
same defense he
You
has of
will
Old
try.
Boy.
I like it.
It was horrible and miserable, and that's the human condition. So that was good. Therefore, it was good.
You guys, it's the same. This is the same thing. It was a very sad movie. It's very depressing. All that good stuff.
It wasn't even that.
But-
Because,
It wasn't
again,
even
I
that
was with it
sad.
for the first half,
Yeah.
and then just.
I mean,
We'll get into it.
yeah. Okay. So for those of you at home, if you're tuning in, thank you. If you're wondering why you can't chat in the chat
Because you're a
box, it's
fool.
because you have not liked or subscribed to our channel. So go ahead and do that so you can join in. So you can tell us what you think. You can tell us how bad
scroll up the
Liam's
chat.
takes are. And
Is that true? I feel like there's no way my friends that were commenting on this video the other week are subscribed to our podcast.
They
Maybe I
have to
shouldn't
be.
say
They
that.
actually
Oh,
have
really?
to be. Yeah.
Oh, well,
there's
good
no
on
way.
them.
They literally cannot be commenting on this and not be subscribed.
That's beautiful.
So,
They support me.
so if you're watching
love
and
that.
wondering why, that's why. So this past week, we watched The Brutalist. If you didn't know by the title. And we attempted to watch a few other movies, but Mr. Maxwell, everybody's boo him.
Well, it was only one movie.
The Presence was an hour. It was like a neat hour and 20 minutes.
Yeah,
This
it was not on
movie
streaming.
Was
No, it's still in theaters.
It's in theaters.
Yeah.
You dork.
I got to
but
be
it's still,
streamed. It got to be
it's
quick.
Still, it's a neat 1 hour and 20 minutes.
I'm a busy man.
It is less than half
Bouncing
We
around.
how
went
long
Sunday
The Brutalist
afternoon, and I
is.
got home at like 2 and took a nap.
Let's for the audience tell how many days did you give me to watch this movie?
3 weeks.
No, the
The
present.
Presence.
1 week.
No,
Let's look at the
Warmer.
chat. Let me pull up the
Warmer.
let me
Oh
pull
my
the text.
3 days. 3 days. Friday.
All right,
Friday,
let me see
Saturday.
when Greg sent.
Friday,
okay.
Saturday. I'm not going to the movie theater.
Friday.
Sunday.
Yeah, you sent that Friday.
All
at
right,
3.
so that's just telling me
So
that,
that's
that
me.
you can't take charge at all and just say, hey, Greg, by the way, you can't pick a movie at this point because I don't have the time.
Well, I like to think that I do at the time, but I never do.
There you go.
To
There
be
it is.
fair, this
Bingo.
was Greg's
Bingo.
plan after he rewatched LXG and realized, this movie's actually not good. I don't want to talk
Yeah,
about it.
yeah. So who's really at
The
fault? He picked
original
League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. Let's not hide the
original
lead here.
plan was that we were picking one to watch at home and one in the theaters, and I said League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. I grew up watching that movie as a kid. It was so much fun. you know, it can't be that bad.
was
Back on
pretty
it.
bad.
It was pretty darn bad.
It's that bad.
That movie was the corniest movie I've ever
How
seen.
bad?
It felt like a Spy Kids movie.
How bad was the Jekyll and Hyde?
The-
Oh my god!
dude, his
It's the
arms
worst
just
CGI
when
I've
he
ever seen.
showed up, I was like,
it's not CGI.
not
Or
real.
whatever you call it.
but even though I was like, this is not real, right? They're not going with this, right?
Yeah, like when they introduce you to him and he's like running over the rooftops. I'm like,
like,
no.
So,
No,
okay, so
right?
why don't we get that one out of the way before we jump into the
I
Brutalist?
would prefer to not talk
do we
about
need
that
to
movie
talk
ever
about
again,
this
but-
movie? Are we gonna talk about this movie?
So very very briefly,
Okay.
because I was just like,
I only have positive reviews.
so the Nautilus is like 2 miles long and like 100 feet high, and he's just like pulling it into the harbor. And then you're like, guys, you realize that the ocean gets more shallow when you get towards land, right? Like, you know,
Where
that
is it
pirate
going?
ships with pirate ships, except at like certain ports, would send small boats out. Like the ship would anchor out in the sound, and then you take the small boat in, because if you tried to get closer, you'd run aground. And this is just like this 200-foot tall metal line. And I'm like,
The Sword of the Ocean, dude. Get it right.
also, he's like, oh, we're this secret society. There's like 1,000 crew members,
There was like, where are their families?
and
How
then
do
he's
they
just
keep
got like a Rolls
reproducing?
Royce, and he's like, I call it an automobile. I was like, what the hell, man? Like,
That was I didn't do a lot of notes on that, but I did when I was watching it. Sean Connery's last movie. So he literally made this movie. He's like, I'm done.
he wasn't.
I didn't even know
he
that.
wasn't terrible in it.
He was
he's
But
he was
fine.
the
But
glue
here's the
holding
problem
it
I have with this
together.
character. They keep saying like, oh, you know, Quartermain is like this legendary guy, and they don't tell us anything he ever did.
Yeah.
They're just like, he was just like, yeah, I took my son on a mission and my son died. I was like, well, that's poignant. What the hell did you do? You like, you're not telling us who you
he
were.
shot people at great distances.
So he was a sniper.
That's all we need to know.
I guess. And then Tom Sawyer, like, what did that have to do with Tom Sawyer?
It's
The story, like, he's just like, hi, I'm an American. Also, my name is
Tom Sawyer.
like, okay. You might as well have been like, hello, I am.
Paul Bunyan.
It
Like,
was
guys.
like I had no idea that like I didn't remember any of this from when I went. I turned this thing on and I'm like dying at every scene because I'm just thinking of you guys having to watch this movie. And I'm like, oh no, it
was
it's
pretty
so
boring.
bad.
It was also the director's last movie he's ever directed.
I did-
Yeah,
Hollywood
that
saw. They're like,
counts.
I liked
okay, we're
Even
not-
Hollywood
we're not
was like,
funding
yeah,
anything
I don't
from
know
this
about
guy.
one. Yeah.
I liked Skinner. I thought he was cool. The invisible guy.
I thought the way
did
they
that
did
well.
the way they did
He
his
was
makeup
fine.
for the most part was
Yeah.
pretty
I
good.
hated it.
His heel turn, or him, the red herring of him being the bad. Well, that was so obvious.
Yeah.
I was like, come on, guys, it's clearly Dorian Gray. Like,
I
he's
hated,
clearly so
I
evil.
hated his
Oh,
character.
he was awful.
He was awful.
Who? Dorian Gray?
Yeah, I hated
Yeah.
him.
Dorian Gray was literally like a Power Ranger. Like he was
Yeah.
so every line he had
Oh, so
He's
cringy.
was so bad.
So bad, man.
Oh my god, I can't even repeat all
Yeah,
the
I
lines
know.
because they were just so. He's
Also-
like, oh, and Dorian was clearly the big bad wolf, and he's like, growl.
Oh, I remember that
Oh
one.
my gosh,
it
I
was
was like,
so bad. That was the one. That was the one that I was
dude.
like, oh,
There's no way this is happening.
No, when they
I'm
all
gonna turn
put their
this off.
hands in the middle, they all like put their hands
that was
in,
so
and then the other
cheesy,
person, the other person, and they all looked at each other. They're like, and they just nod, and then they go on the mission.
So the thing is, like, the
Oh,
one story
man.
thread that was actually interesting, and they did an okay job with it, but it was really much more interesting, was the idea of Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde fighting with his bad side, and then, you know, them coming to terms with each other, and basically Hyde deciding to not be evil. Which kind of defeats the whole point of Jekyll
Yeah,
and
and
Hyde.
that's definitely
The whole
not,
point
like,
of Jekyll and
accurate to his
Hyde-
character.
Yeah, the whole point of the book Jekyll and Hyde is interesting because it came out at the same time as Frankenstein. And the whole point of Frankenstein is like, Frankenstein's like, I'm a monster because society made me a monster. It's the Joker, right? He's like, I'm a monster because of what society made me, and it's all your fault, townspeople. For if you hadn't, you know, persecuted me, I wouldn't have become a murderous monster. And the whole point of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde is Dr. Jekyll's like this nice guy, but inside everyone is a monster waiting to get out. That's the whole point of that story. So like, if you make the monster be like, actually, I'm a good guy, and it's like, it's not really the point.
Yeah.
But okay.
Okay, we're done with
yeah,
Yeah,
we can
but,
be done with that. It was not a good
Okay,
operation,
can we
man.
appreciate that? So when they're in Moriarty's base, and it's like all these weapons of war, and one of them's just a tank. Okay, cool. I mean, like tanks have been around since World War I. I guess it's like
This is pre.
yeah, it was
tank
pre World War I. No,
time.
tanks. I don't remember when tanks exactly when tanks came around. I'd have to look that up. But this is like turn of the century, so it's you know 20 years before World War I happens.
Cars hadn't been invented yet. 'Cause
Yes, they had. It was like 1870.
No, but that's why he was like, "What is that?" And he's like, "I call it an automobile."
Yeah, but the automobiles actually were invented in the mid 1800s, but they didn't become like widespread until mass production with the Model T.
It's science time.
Anyways.
Nathaniel Levinson.
I was waiting for you to hit
Teach
that
me,
button.
doctor.
You added some stuff to that.
No,
No.
it's the
It's
same.
always been that.
It's
I've never
always
heard
it.
that last bit.
It's because it's
That's 'cause
only
you're
ever
probably
played.
talking
It's only
while
ever
you're-
played while you're monologuing,
Yeah.
and then I play it.
I literally have not
Yeah.
heard that.
And you're just so zoned in on what you're talking about, you're not even acknowledging.
What can I say? I'm a
the
teacher.
sound.
This is my job, guys. I don't know what to tell you. No, but so he's got like tanks, and he's building like 7 of the. First of all, they're in like
Nautiluses.
Mongolia.
How-
Where are you getting all the raw
Also,
materials for that?
How long has he been there making
Yeah,
these things? Because
so-
from the
but
movies,
anyways.
yeah, okay.
But anyways,
It's not even worth this.
the thing that made me laugh was he has these like Iron Man suits, and it's just like plate armor has been around since like the 1000s. Like, guys, you didn't invent new technology. You're just like, hey, what if I got a medieval knight and just gave him a gun? And he's like, his fault, motherfucker. I'm like, guys, it's literally just armor. It's just metal armor. Like, this isn't that impressive.
Also, Skinner gets like melted, and then he's just
And
fine at the end.
he's just fine. I was like, oh, Skinner died.
I was like, Skinner
And then
is
he's just
clearly
fine.
dead. He was fine.
Yeah, I'm gonna be honest. I didn't even watch the ending.
How far did you get?
I did. You know what I did? I did one of these things. I made it like 75% of the way through, and then 15 seconds. Okay, I understand what's happening. 15 seconds. Movie's done.
I did a little bit of that through
So
some
I
of
like
the action
I
scenes.
skimmed it. And I was like,
You
okay,
dogs.
and then I looked at the synopsis on IMDb, and I was like, all right.
I watched the whole darn thing.
I watched most of it. I skipped a
Couldn't
little
do it.
bit. I
Well-
skipped a little bit in the laboratory where it's just like a bunch of action. I'm like, none of this matters.
That's right. I draw the line.
That's the
at that
best
moment.
part. All right. Well, for the audience
don't
that's
matter.
watching,
None of this matters.
we're not talking about Leave Extraordinary Gentlemen.
Thank the
We
Lord.
opted
We're
out.
talking about a much worse movie.
We were talking
No.
about.
Not a worse movie, a much more miserable movie.
Maybe.
It-
What do you mean,
Maybe I'd agree with that.
I don't remember anyone getting sexually assaulted in LXG, so
No, that's true.
So we were talking about The Brutalist, and I'll give you a brief synopsis of this movie. So this is about time period. Help me out.
Post World War II.
Post World War
So
II.
it goes from part 1 is like 46 to 52, and then part 2 is 53 to 60.
Okay. So there's a Polish Jew by the name of
Hungarian.
Laszlo Toth.
He's from Budapest.
Hungarian Jew.
Okay, Hungarian Jew.
Yeah.
He immigrates to the U.S.
How are we letting him do the
watch
recap?
that movie?
He immigrates to the
You haven't
U.S.
watched the movie? It's like the easiest
and
part to
he's
pick up.
okay. You know what? How about Liam? You like the movie? Go ahead and give us.
Nathanael's got this one.
I got this one.
It is.
Okay, so he comes to the U.S. and he had to stay with the brother. It turns out he's an architect of some renown, and he specializes in brutalist architecture. Brutalist architecture is form over function, or sorry, that's the opposite. Function over form. It's all concrete and steel, very blocky, very ugly. But that's what he specializes in. So he starts living with his brother while his wife and niece are stuck in the Soviet Union, and so he's sending them. There's letters like going back and forth between him and his wife while they're stuck there. He starts working for his brother who owns a furniture store and does like jobs around town. They end up doing a job for this really, really rich person, and he redesigns the library for them. And there's this big kerfuffle where he comes back and he's like, "Oh my gosh, there's black people in my yard and a Jew in my library." So like clearly this guy is a wonk. But then, yeah. But then he comes back.
Of Willy Wonka descent.
Yes.
It's a real word.
But then he comes back to him and is this about the same time? Anyways, he comes back to the guy and he's like, "Hey, I actually really like your library, and I want you to, like, my mother just passed away. I want you to design a building, in her, like, a big community center in her memory." So the rest of the movie is about him. Basically, is about him building this civic center.
And the big, and then part 2, the big thing is his wife from Hungary,
yeah.
Budapest, comes over. Like
his wife and his niece end up
Yeah.
coming back in like very beginning of part 2. He's reunited with his wife and his niece.
Yeah, and the whole part 1, he's like yearning for his wife to come over. Like he made it over. He's going to establish himself, and then she's going to join him. Part 2 is her interactions with the rich guy and him, and as they progress through being
and then it
immigrants.
escalates into some terrible stuff, and then the movie just kind of abruptly ends, and then it fast forwards. So loud.
So loud.
And then it fast forwards to this
apologize.
epilogue that's like in the 70s or 80s. I think it's in the 80s, and it's like it's. I think it might be like back in Budapest. I wasn't paying. I didn't. It's somewhere in Europe.
but it wasn't in.
It was somewhere in Europe.
It wasn't where he was.
No.
But,
But they're doing some like celebration of his life, and then the niece. Did they use the same actor for the mom
did.
for the old niece?
Yep. Yeah.
And then the new niece was the old niece. Yeah, so I pull a fast one, which was I guess I get it, but it was very confusing for me watching it. I was like, wait, that's a different actor.
Yeah.
Anyways. She gives like a whole presentation with some really weird. I guess it was supposed to give you like a vibe of like an '80s PowerPoint presentation. It was doing these weird like crossfades and star wipes, and I didn't do star wipes. But
It was
like
bad.
It was
It
weird.
was overall. Everybody thinks that's a bad part of the movie, even if you like the movie.
Yeah, but
The epilogue.
again,
I didn't think it was as bad as you guys
I
did,
think the
but-
intention of that was for it to feel like she was like you were there watching someone give a presentation in the '80s, which I guess they captured, but it's still ugly.
It was a bit tacked on.
Yeah,
Like,
and
it didn't
and the
feel like it
biggest
was
problem
part of
is
the movie.
in that, and that's the end of the movie. And in that epilogue, they dump a ton of exposition on you that, from what I could remember, was either barely touched on or not addressed at all
Right.
in the movie, and was actually really important to the plot. It turned out, which made me angry at the movie. I would have been just sad, but that one made me actively angry. So the epilogue kind of ruined what little bit of the movie I enjoyed.
It didn't. I understand the complaints against it, but it didn't do as much negative to me as it did to most, I would say. It was a bit tacked on. It was like heavy-handed. It was explaining things a bit too much. I just felt like I was feeling things at that point in the movie.
I guess.
And then that part of the movie was telling me how to feel,
I guess.
which kind of took me out of it a little bit. But I didn't hate the concept of what she was saying. It was just heavy-handed.
I was like, well, that would have been really interesting if I had known that, and
well,
then seen his actions through that lens. That would have made it much more interesting and poignant if I'd have known that.
That was part of the problem. Is that I think everybody appreciated the context of what she was saying because that was arguably the only interesting part of the whole movie. Is she was like, oh, and by the way, like this is why he created it the way he did, and you're going, oh my gosh, like that's really fascinating because the whole rest of the movie. It didn't bother telling me anything about Brutalist architecture other than one piece of obscure dialogue about a cube. And
It
you're
wasn't really about brutalist architecture.
I would have loved to know a
It
little
was
bit more
named
about it.
and that was like the whole point
That was-
of his. Which again,
If you're gonna make a story-
I didn't fully understand why he kept talking about brutalist architecture as though it was supposed to be pretty because it's hideous
That's the point.
until the end of the movie.
But
and
that's
then,
his passion. So he
Sure.
he finds beauty in it.
So let
But
me
it
ask
is
you this.
historically very blocky and functional.
It's not intended to be pretty.
Yeah.
Well,
it's
let me
functional.
ask you this. So if Brutalist architecture isn't the point of the movie, what's the point of the movie?
An immigrant coming over to America, a creative immigrant trying to bring something to America after the most horrific thing in world history and continually getting chopped down by people who still have bias towards him, and a creative who is at the whim of the person funding his endeavors. And he's wrestling with that. That is the point.
Okay, but he's wrestling with that in what way?
He's wrestling with the fact that he wants to do it the right way, but he's getting chopped down by Guy Pearce, who's going behind his back, talking to other architects, trying to cut corners. But he's passionate about this thing, so he doesn't care how much money it costs or how much time it takes. He wants to do this the right way, and that's why, like in the beginning of the movie, he gets so emotional when his buildings are the only things that lasted over there in Budapest,
Right.
post the Holocaust, was because he built it the right way. And that's what I really like that scene where he's sitting with Guy Pearce the second time around,
Yeah.
and Guy Pearce shows him his buildings. Because think about how crazy tragic that would be for someone who's so passionate about something. He's basically in his mind is everything I did, everything I was passionate about and I built is devastated and gone. I'll never see it again. But then Guy Pearce is like, no, still there, and it's the only things there because you did it the right way. It's it's an immigrant story, and it's a creative. It tackles a lot of things. I think those are the two main themes.
See that aspect of the movie, and just to give the audience to clue you in. So this movie is 3 hours and 35 minutes long. It's got
With an intermission.
a 12-minute or 10-minute intermission. So the first 2 hours that you watch before the intermission, I actually said, hey, this is kind of interesting.
Thought it was
I think this is
fantastic.
about as interesting as you can make a movie about a guy immigrating in and doing brutalist architecture. It's a pretty dense boring topic. Like if it were just to say that to somebody, they'd be like, "Oh, that sounds like a very boring movie."
Yeah.
And it did a decent job to make some of the dialogue sound interesting. But the problem was that you had like an hour and 40 minutes left that just drug, dude. I mean,
The second half was definitely not as good as the first half.
yeah. Well, and that to me is a problem that turns, like, again, I can be generous and look for those things because I agree. I think the conversation, specifically the conversation that he has with Pierce in that little diner, is one of the better scenes in the movie. Also, his conversation where he talks about the cube and why Brutalist architecture is the way it is. It's the only bit of information we get about Brutalist architecture, which irked me a little bit, but it was interesting. I liked the montage of him creating the library. That was good. But those were all in the first half, and they were all small moments. And the larger context of the movie were just these weird exchanges of dialogue that I feel like didn't hold anything. And I'm like, if you're going to be a movie that's 4 hours long, roughly, that is just, it's virtually 100% just dialogue, and you don't have just, I mean, that's how up your own ass do you think you have to be like, I'm going to be a 4-hour movie with just a bunch of people talking. It's like, all right, it better be some of the greatest talk. I mean, people complain about The Lord of the Rings being 3.5 hours long, and that movie has like 12 battles in it, and epic moments happening every other. This is just like people walking and talking, and it's just not very
Arguably, The
compelling.
Godfather is mostly people talking, and that one's like 3 hours.
That was a comparison I was going to make. Obviously, there's more action in Godfather, but do we view The Godfather as pretentious?
It's a little pretentious.
Cool. I would agree. And I would also agree this is pretentious,
Yeah.
but that doesn't mean it's
The
a bad
Godfather's
movie.
a good movie. I think it's way too long. I think it could be much
Sure,
shorter.
but like I'm saying, it is pretentious, The Brutalist.
Oh, 100%. That's not the
Yes.
problem
For sure.
I have with it.
But that doesn't mean it's a bad movie to me.
Yeah,
like
that's not the problem I have with the movie. It's pretentious as all get out, but
Yeah.
that's not the problem I have with the movie. The problem I had with the movie was, again, like really what spoiled it for me was that epilogue. Because, okay, we're going to really get into it to explain why the epilogue drew it
Yeah.
off. Okay, so, and we can talk about the nasty stuff that happens in part 2 and my thoughts on that, but this is separate issue. So he's building this massive concrete structure, and there's this whole thing where it's like got this big modular part, and then it's got 2 small rooms on the side, but the ceilings are really, really high. And he gets in this whole, he throws a fit because this other architect who's being brought in just basically wants to chop 10 feet off of the roof height. And he says, that's absolutely unacceptable. And they're like, why does it matter if it's 40 feet or 50 feet? It's useless space. It doesn't matter. And he says, no, we're doing it 50 feet. I'll pay it on my own wages. Like, he makes a big deal out of this. And so at that point, you're just like, okay, well, he's just being an asshole because someone else is, like, changing his art. And at no point during the rest of that movie, up until the epilogue, does it resolve why he cared so much about those 10 feet. Then in the epilogue, you find out that he and his wife, and they barely mention this, that he and his wife were forcibly separated. Okay. It never explicitly says that he and his wife were in different concentration camps.
Yeah.
You could maybe imply that they were put into concentration camps, but because of the opening of the movie,
But he does say they were forcibly separated.
yes,
in the first
okay. But here's why I didn't make that connection. In the opening of the movie, he's going to America. His wife and his niece are stuck in the Soviet Union. That's what I thought the forcible separation was.
Yeah.
because it opens with soldiers interrogating his niece. So to me, that read as, oh, this was the forcible separation. They were taken to the Soviet Union, and he escaped to America. That was the forcible separation. You know,
I don't really see why that matters, though.
because in the epilogue, when she's explaining
'Cause that
why
would've
he
been
designed, so in the epilogue, the niece giving her speech about her uncle and all his accomplishments explains why he designed the building the way he did.
Because he was in a concentration camp.
You know, because he and her were in different. He was in Dachau, and she was in I don't remember the name. So they were in different concentration camps, and he designed the rooms to be the same size as the rooms that they were in the concentration camps, but with the vaulted roofs. And the significance of the vaulted roofs is that you could look up and see freedom and see the
That's what they
see
didn't
beyond the
have.
ceiling.
And
And then the whole underground tunnels, which made no sense to me. I was like, I don't understand what these underground tunnels are there for. she just exposition dumps and explains like the underground tunnels were so that he and her would always be connected even though they were in different concentration camps. I was like, that's really impactful and poignant. Why didn't you give me any of this during the movie?
Yeah, I didn't need any
It was
of it during
all
the movie.
really because
Yeah,
I
no,
feel like
I was totally
that,
fine with
because
that.
I feel like
that being the aha moment at the end. I thought it was heavy-handed.
but it should that
I thought they
should,
could have worked it in a little better, but I had no
or at
problem
all.
with.
That's the thing is it's not even like she explains that like, oh, that's what the meaning of all this was. But I got nothing out of that except for that one line where he's like, we were forcibly separated, and that one part where he complains about the roofs being too short. That was like, okay, I understand now why he was complaining about the roof. But that was two things in a 3.5-hour movie.
Mm-hmm. Well, and you can do that in so many creative ways. I bet you we could sit here on this podcast and be like, oh, they could have said this. Like they could have had a whole scene where he runs off and he's like really emotional, he's tearing up. And one of the other workers, the one guy that's actually seemed like a stand-up dude that kept trying to work with him, that could have walked over and been like, "Hey, just tell me what's the deal with this? You know, what's the whole?" And and you can tell he's really moved by this, infected by it, and he's doing his best to understand them because he doesn't try to at all. He just flips out on him. He cusses him out. He's kind of a jerk.
That was after he got sexually assaulted, but yeah.
No, I think this is before.
No, it was after.
Is after
That-
Yeah, when he freaked out on his
sense to me.
friend, that was after he got sexually assaulted.
Okay.
That was when he started to ramp up.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah,
actually, I don't think so.
100%.
Doesn't he flip out before they go to Italy?
He definitely flips out before they go to Italy.
No, he doesn't.
Yes.
I can assure you he does.
Okay, I'm pretty sure he does.
But yeah, that whole thing.
He gets assaulted when they go to get the marble.
Like
The
in the
part where
tunnels
he
in
gets
Italy.
angry
No, it was
is
after. It was after. I'm looking at it right now. Next question. Continue.
what do you mean you're looking at it?
I'm
right
looking at the
now?
synopsis of the entire movie.
Yeah, but what I'm telling you is that
it was after. It
All right,
was
should we
after
talk about the guy
they
Pearce in
went
the
to
room?
get the marble.
okay.
Should we talk about
let
the guy
me-
Pearce in the room?
All right, fine.
Yeah, go ahead. Well, did you want to finish your point?
Yeah, let me just. Okay, so my whole point was just that.
But that made sense because it was after.
No, he was already losing. Like he was not a good dude before that. I mean, he was hooked on opium. He was cheating on his wife, and he was
But it made more sense after he got sexually assaulted that he freaked out on his only friend. We could understand how that would cause trauma and cause you to shut off everybody else.
Well, it could also be because he was denying his wife and didn't want to take care of his crippled wife, or
No,
take-
I never got that impression.
I never got.
I never got that impression from her.
I never got that was the straw that broke the camel's
for
back.
sure was like 100%.
He was already
he got
acting like
sexually
that.
assaulted.
Yes, but
he
he
was totally different. He wasn't totally different, but he was definitely aggressively different after the sexual assault.
He was already turning into kind of a lousy.
He was
dude.
getting obsessive.
Okay, so just to put it into context,
Oh,
he
he was-
virtually
he was
cheated on his
never,
wife
like, yeah.
right before he got sexually assaulted.
Yeah, he was never
He cheated on her that night after he got hammered and shot up with all of his drugs.
Yeah.
And then afterwards, you're right. It's
do
brutal
think-
and it's terrible.
yeah,
but
I'm not
do
arguing
think-
that he was a great guy
Okay.
beforehand, but I'm saying
Right,
that
but-
was the straw
But
that
I
broke
do
the
think
camel's
I
back,
do
was him
think
getting
to the
sexually
movie's
assaulted.
credit, and now this is very pretentious, right? But to the movie's credit, I do think there is an intentional juxtaposition between how he writes to his wife, how he talks about his wife, and then how often we see him cheating on his wife. Like the very first thing he does in America is go to a brothel.
Yeah.
So,
my point, it wasn't even that. I'm not trying to defend his character at this point. My whole point was that at that time where he was chewing out that guy, he could have had a moment where he stops and he says, okay, I understand why this seems weird, but it's super, super important to me. And he maybe points out a few things. Doesn't have to give it all away, but at least it lets the audience know that there's a reason here. Maybe I don't know the reason, and maybe I can still have the aha moment at the end, but instead we got 3 hours and 15 minutes of him just being a weirdo, and we couldn't figure out why or what the purpose of his architecture is. And at the end, somebody going, it all had purpose. And you're like, all right, well, then I could have just watched this 10-minute thing at the end.
and
Because
the thing is,
the whole rest of it was
again-
agonizing.
Again, because brutalist architecture is the whole point of brutalist architecture is it is sturdy, it lasts forever, it functions, and it's ugly because we don't care about aesthetics. The idea of saying, I'm going to take that idea that something that will last a long time and somehow make that into something beautiful in the way he did it with light and negative space, like the cross on the altar. It's like, okay, that's actually really interesting. And they really just kind of breeze past that and then dump it on you at the very end. I'm like, that's the interesting thing of why he's so into using brutalist architecture to make beautiful things, when the reality is if you really wanted to make something beautiful, you build something like a cathedral, like more Gothic or something like that would actually be beautiful.
Yeah. Well, I think we can all agree that the epilogue had issues, but the difference with me is I liked the previous 3 hours. So I was more fine with the epilogue than you guys were.
So let's talk about the Guy Pearce in the room.
Yeah.
Why did Guy Pearce rape him?
Power.
Okay, but so
Power and control.
Yeah,
he was doing it the whole movie.
But here's the thing: if it's just that, if he's just supposed to be, and again, the second half of the movie, I feel like the message was, and after he gets he ODs his wife, and then they're in the hospital, and she says this country is rotten, and the whole niece thing of like we need to go back to Israel, that's our country, feels like that was the point of the movie. That.
Definitely is the message of the movie.
The message of the movie was like, they're never going to be welcome in America. It's the rich, white, the WASPs taking advantage of you and
I think that's
literally, metaphorically, and literally raping you. But Guy Pearce, I feel like, had absolutely, but in the first half, I would have suspected the son of doing that. Because the son was like an asshole the whole time. But Guy Pearce was like, yeah, he came off a little standoffish, but he apologized for that. He funded him for these things. He helped him get his wife and kids back. He was doing a lot of really nice things that he didn't have to do if he just wanted him to build the building. Because he would have built the building if he was like, hey, build this building, and I'll help you get your wife back. But they never actually did that.
But I think that's why he was such a good character, is because of the complexity of his character throughout the length of the movie. That's why I thought he was a great character.
The way he talked was so weird. He sounded like Vincent D'Onofrio in Daredevil. I swear.
Yeah, okay, maybe, yeah.
It's so weird. Like his affect was
think
just
about the
bonkers.
things I wanna say.
And then the way this kid was just like, "Father," I was like, "What am I?"
Yeah, he was a spoiled brat.
Yeah.
Like,
Oh, absolutely. And the daughter, I really thought the daughter and the son were going to be like incestuous, and that was going to be but no, they were just the daughter was apparently a nice person.
Yeah.
When did she ever do anything?
I forgot she was in the movie.
Yeah, exactly. She just didn't exist in the film to the very end.
Yeah.
But anyways, and then the movie. Okay, so they go to Italy to get this slab of marble, and there's like this little after party in the marble mines, and Adrian Brody's character sneaks off to do heroin, and while he's completely out of it, Guy Pearce's character finds him and just like, guess I'm gonna rape him, and rapes him, and then just like leaves, and then. Later in the movie, because his wife is having chronic pain because of her osteoporosis, because of the condition she was in Soviet Union. So he gives her heroin, and then she ODs. He takes her to the hospital, and apparently while they were both high on heroin, he told her that Guy Pearce raped him. And so like the end of the movie is she by herself going to the Guy Pearce house and walking in on them having dinner, and is like, yeah, your dad's a rapist. Ask my husband. Ask my husband what he did to him, and then walks out. And that's the end of the movie before the epilogue.
Sorry,
it
doesn't
just like
walk
cuts.
out, gets drugged
You're right.
out.
You're right. The son like throws her to the floor, and then the sister is like trying to help him, and then the dad like runs. Guy Pearce runs off.
He kills himself.
Unclear. I was assuming so. I was really expecting to find him like dead on, because they were looking for him in the building.
Right.
I kept expecting to find him on the altar like dead.
I think by all accounts he probably was.
Probably
they just didn't overtly show it.
They didn't show anything. So
Yeah.
presumably, I was assuming that he went and killed himself.
I think that's the assumption.
That's the assumption, but that is completely unclear. That's it completely ambiguous whether he actually did or not. Because then it just cuts to 20 years later in the epilogue. I was like, that was, and the wife is dead, and Adrian Brody's in a wheelchair, not talking. And I'm like, that was really abrupt and very bizarre way to just slam the brakes on the movie. Like, I don't know.
Thought it was fine.
The movie also thought it was fitting to spend 15 minutes looking for him and not finding him, expounding zero on the movie. Nothing evolved at that point in the movie. Just from a pure storytelling film writing aspect, like that would just be huge. Like that would just be like, oh yeah, you got to take off the 15 minutes where nothing happens and they're just all walking around.
Yeah, and
like
so
maybe, and then the guy's like, oh, it's got to stay in there.
And so here's where I would
It's
I would need the director.
I totally disagree.
I would need the director to sit down and
I totally disagree.
and tell me what his intentions were with the movie, because
Why were those 15 minutes important?
I'm not saying they were, but I'm saying they gave him the creative liberty to do 3.5 hours, and that's what he did. Listen, I'm not saying every scene was like needed to be in the movie, but I was fine with the story that was.
I think you're not willing to critique it, which is sad. I think you should.
I already
critique
have.
it.
I already have.
So
I critiqued the epilogue.
think that the the 15 minutes.
It's
of
not
nonsense.
it's not a rewatchable movie. It's pretentious, but it is an incredibly well-made movie.
What
and
about
I love
it makes
the story.
it well made or
$10
difficult
million
to make?
budget. By
That's
the way,
fine.
That's insane.
Yeah. Well, okay,
That's
you
insane.
You should watch the other
Presents
movie.
had a $10 budget.
Yeah.
$10 million movie.
You should go watch
I should
Presents.
look up what the
Look
budget
up-
was.
look up
'cause
the
it was-
budget
It
in
was all
Presents.
shot in one.
That's
in one.
that
place.
director's like pretty well known. That was a weird movie that just like jumped out of nowhere.
What, Presents?
Presents, yeah,
Dude,
That's
it
a
was-
well-known
bad.
movie
It
or
wasn't
a
bad.
well-known director.
It was an interesting movie.
$2 million budget.
$2 million. Suck it, Liam.
Which doesn't
Better
surprise me at all.
movie.
It's already gross. It's only grossed 3.3 million, but it's already made its money back, which I love.
That's
I mean,
crazy,
it was
actually.
honestly, it was interesting. I don't think I could have handled it being longer than it was.
Yeah.
But the ending, I thought the ending was good. It dawdled a little. But here's one thing that Presents did really well that I would give it major props for, that it could have completely failed, which the epilogue of Brutalist did. And then I'm not just saying epilogue of Brutalist did this, but like a lot of movies will do this. My mind goes to the Suicide Squad. This is Katana. Her sword sucks the souls of her. Like, you know, when they're just like dumping exposition on you. So they easily could have done that because the Presence, the whole movie takes place from the perspective of a spirit that is in the house, that's just wandering around the house, and it's just overhearing conversations. So you get the whole story that you need to piece together from conversations that other characters are having, and they all sound like conversations that these characters would actually have, right? Because a lot of times when characters have conversations, they're like telling each other information. They're like, you know this. Why are you telling me this? You're saying this because the audience needs to hear it, which is usually why.
It's like somebody narrating their thoughts.
which
Hey,
is-
I'm going to put
yeah.
this into this drink right here, and then put the drink down. It's like, okay, why is this person
which is
announcing it?
usually why you have an audience surrogate character who doesn't know anything, so things have to be explained to them. So that way, the exposition dump is more natural.
Right.
Like in Inception, where they're bringing the girl in. It's like all the people on the team already know all of this, but they're explaining it to her, so they're reiterating everything that they already know.
Right.
They wouldn't have this conversation if she wasn't there.
Right.
Sorry, if he wasn't there. Yikes.
Oh my god.
I wonder if the digital versions like go back and change Elliot Page to Elliot Page. I bet they do.
Oh, it
And
didn't
you're
click with me.
And
It
people,
didn't click. I
in
was
the
like,
future,
wait.
people who don't know are like watching it like, man, this Elliot Page guy's really effeminate.
I wouldn't be surprised if they like had to change
I
that
would
in
not
the
be
credits.
I wouldn't be surprised either.
Yeah.
And someone's got a bootleg like physical copy, like it still says Ellen
the
Page.
original.
Like FBI, it says Ellen Page. You're misgendering her.
I bet if they
not in Trump's America.
if they showed Inception on like TV, I bet you the credits have changed.
Did you see the TikTok breakdowns when they're like, Trump said there were only two genders? Wham! Like,
Oh, I could only
because there are.
imagine.
Oh my gosh!
The
But
cha-
anyways,
the chaos
we're
of
not.
that.
We're not talking
not
about
that
politics.
kind
We're
of
not that kind of
podcast.
podcast. It was very funny though.
Let's talk about Adrian Brody because he's
Oh, he
the main
did a
actor, and
phenomenal
he
job.
was phenomenal.
Yeah,
Great job.
Phenomenal.
no question.
Great job.
He would deserve an Oscar.
Yeah,
for
I thought
best
him
actor.
and Guy Pearce were excellent.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree.
I mean, everyone else was a secondary character. And okay, one thing I will say I appreciated about the movie is that it really never leaves Adrian Brody. It is Adrian Brody's story. It is
Yeah,
100%
totally.
about him. It never leaves, the camera never leaves him except for that very end when she confronts Guy Pearce.
That's it's pretty much the only scene that he's not in.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I'm
yes.
pretty sure. Yeah.
But I mean, it's funny. You guys ever seen the Pianist?
Yeah, the pianist.
The pianist.
It's actually pronounced Pianist. Did you know
Pianist.
Pianist. I mean,
Pianist.
it's
that?
Pianist.
It's not.
it's pianist.
It tries to be close, but it's
It's
not.
very close to
pianist.
It feels like
Pianist.
he's like an extension of his character in the
Yeah.
Pianist. It's a very similar role.
Yeah,
but
he's playing a-
I think he like is Laszlo Toth.
Yeah, no,
like when I think about Adrian Brody right now, I'm like, oh, that's Laszlo Toth. Like he disappears.
When I think of
into
Adrian
the
Brody, I
guy.
think of Grand Budapest Hotel. And when he pops up from the front row and yells and obscenity.
Oh yeah.
That's my.
Don't
that
say
is
it,
my.
we'll get
I'm not going to
canceled.
say it on air, but that is my number one favorite Adrian Brody moment. It's just so fun. It just comes out of nowhere, and it's so funny.
No, so I
Man is
think
versatile.
I definitely think that he's probably deserving of best actor. I mean,
It's either him or Chalamet.
again,
From
Timothy
I
Chalamet?
get
From which one?
I get a little
Completed the Bob
I get a
Dylan
little bit
biopic.
irritated
one.
at
I forgot that was
the
him.
at Oscar bait stuff where they're just like, hey, we're gonna have you.
I will say this didn't feel like Oscar baity in the way that like Emilia Perez was Oscar baity.
or Zone of Interest.
Or Zone of Interest was
Yeah.
Oscar baity. This felt like this was the director had this vision for this movie and executed it. And
Yeah.
to that extent, so what I was we went with another guy, Andrew, who's been on the. I think we've had
Yeah,
Andrew.
yeah,
on.
he's had-
Andrew
he's been on.
Backerich. He's been on before. And we were talking about it, and I said, I think I respect the movie a whole lot more than I liked the movie. I don't think I enjoyed much at all of the movie. There were a couple things that made me think, but I do respect the vision. I respect the art that went into it, and for the most part the cinematography was, and I mean it was
especially for the budget.
Yeah,
that's impressive.
It was intentionally like very stark. Okay, here's one thing that I totally got lost on. So you know how they had that big railroad accident, and that's when Guy Pearce starts losing it.
Yeah.
When the guy's like putting that, it has that shot of him like putting a box on, and then the springs go down, and then it like goes off in the distance, and then it's just a red. I was like, did someone put a bomb on that train? No, legitimately. Was that like intentional sabotage, or was that just an accident?
It was definitely.
I was very confused.
You could tell that the budget was low in that scene, probably more than ever.
Right.
It was like
But the
this
way it was
distant,
framed, I was like,
strange shot
because
of
there
a
was like in
train.
the box, there was like something you could see in the box, and I was like, wait, did someone put a bomb on the train? I'm legitimately not sure if that was sabotaged by the other architect, or if that was just unlucky.
Yeah. I don't know.
I was like completely unclear.
I don't know.
I was like, wait.
Listen, in a time period where all the movies are so regurgitated,
That's true.
I appreciate a lot the ambitiousness
Yeah.
of the Brutalist.
And I think, I mean, the movies we watched this year for the most part have been in that alley, Nosferatu and Brutalist. But
Yeah.
on the other side of that, they're not really movies that I have any interest in revisiting, which is a shame because I wish I could have both things, like a movie that is, a work of art. But also is enjoyable that I want to go to other people and be like, you need to come watch this movie with me. It was awesome.
Yeah.
And I just feel like I haven't had that experience in a while. And those are much rarer, obviously. It's like the tiny sliver of the Venn diagram of movies, artistically meritorious movies, and movies that actually
For sure. Those are the greats.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I feel like I haven't seen one of those in theaters in a while. I think Wild Robot was the
Not Oppenheimer.
Oppenheimer.
Personally.
I don't really want to watch it again. It was very interesting. I enjoyed it.
It's funny you say that. I haven't watched it again.
Yeah,
I have not watched it since
The thing is, if it was 2 hours
too
long,
long, dude.
If it was 2 hours long, I could watch Oppenheimer again. But 3 hours, if it's not Lord of the Rings, I have trouble with it.
Yeah, no. The Brutalist, the rewatchability is
Very low,
shockingly low,
very low.
But
Yeah,
first watch,
I would say if you're interested in a more artistically driven movie, but it's brutal.
Yeah,
And that has nothing to do with the Brutalist name, but it is a brutal movie, and it's very
well, those are
unpleasant
the
in a lot of
part
ways.
that make me just kind of turn me off and make me, it pulls me out of the movie when things are just intentionally just I can use the term brutal, not ironically. I would use this for
maybe
any
that's
movie.
why it's called that.
okay, hold on, I'm pulling the thesaurus. Let's get some synonyms for brutal.
Maybe that's why it's called that. You know,
The harsh.
It's really harsh in my mellow.
it's harsh on my vibe. dude.
Man, this is just like not vibe. Thesaurus.
It doesn't really matter. Okay, I'm gonna
Cruel, cold-blooded, harsh, severe.
harsh. Yeah. Okay. Well, we'll go with harsh. So the thing that pulls me out of a movie is when it gets so rough and harsh that you're like, they didn't need to use all of that. Like it wasn't necessary, and you know that they're just dumping it in to just. I mean, at one point there was a crippled girl getting beat up and drug across the floor while she was talking about sexual
To be fair,
molestation.
he was accusing their dad. She was accusing their dad of being a rapist,
Which he was.
which he
yeah,
was.
yeah.
But they didn't know that, and so the response obviously
right, but
was the emotional response was very understandable.
But
Obviously, throwing
the
a crippled
purpose-
person across the room is probably never okay.
That was the first time in the movie she stood up. by the
Yes.
way.
The purpose of all that, though, is to make you feel uncomfortable as
Yeah.
a viewer. And I think when they shove so much of it in there, when you're like, hey, let's have an uncomfortable moment to tell an uncomfortable part of the story. But when you're like, hey, there's 12 other ways you could have done this, and in every situation, you're just like, just the normal sex scenes in that movie were just awfully, and I have friends that okay, because I know that I have a disposition towards being like, okay, so much egregious sex in a movie, like it bothers me, and I'm like, you don't need to show that into a movie. It doesn't.
Yeah, just
help
like I didn't need to
push
see
the
Dracula's shadow
storyline.
penis, I didn't need to see Adrian Brody's shadow penis either.
I like again, I'm of that mindset, obviously, so I have a disposition towards it. I have friends that aren't at all, that are just super, and they were even like, dude, it was just weird and uncomfortable. There was too much of it, and it was like the one time he has sex with his wife, he's like, "Oh, let's both shoot up while we do it, and then I'll cover you in a veil."
Oh,
and then
that
I'll
was
just
so
be,
weird.
And I'll be like kind of choking you and making out with you through the. And I'm like,
I thought he was
dude,
about to murder her.
it's
I
just
thought that was
it's-
what was happening.
Yeah, it was just so over the top, and that's where I get pulled from a movie, and I go, you're just intentional. Like I'm rolling my eyes in the theaters because I'm like, you're just doing everything you can to make the audience feel uncomfortable here, and it didn't need to be that way. It wasn't like there are moments, right? Have you seen Hotel Rwanda? Right, great movie. It's real sad. Like there was a lot of real tough truths that you have to face in that movie, and it puts it in your face. I don't necessarily want to see that movie again, but it's a great movie, and those things needed to happen. This one, it's like there was just because it's so long, it makes itself so easy to pick at. If this movie's if this movie's 2 hours,
all right, here's a good.
I'm probably sitting here going, "Hey, it wasn't my favorite movie, but it was done really well."
But hold on.
But when it stretches itself out to 3 hours and 45 minutes, and it's just injecting all the uncomfortable moments it possibly can at you, I don't know. Like, what else am I supposed to think?
Well, hold on.
Okay,
Here's a good synonym for you.
Hold on.
Grim. That movie was grim.
Let me hit you with a thought experiment.
Okay.
You're saying if we take this part out, maybe it'd be better, a bit unnecessary, cutting corners. It's kind of what Guy Pearce was saying to Adrian Brody in the movie. There is theories that the analogy of Adrian Brody being an architect and passionate about it is similar to the filmmaking industry of they gave Brady Corbet, the director, make this the way you want to make it. Us as funders, we're not going to touch it. And that's what Adrian Brody wanted Guy Pearce to do with him. But Guy Pearce was cutting. That's the analogy.
But that's so obnoxiously up your own ass to do that.
But it checks out, though, doesn't it?
But that doesn't make it good at all.
But it does check out, though.
What do you mean it checks out? That's a theory that you have.
No, it's a very straightforward analogy, no?
That is a flimsy theory at best.
It's
but
not.
It connects. It connects a little bit
for sure.
Sure,
It's not flimsy.
That's
yeah.
fine. It's an interesting connection.
Yeah.
It doesn't change anything.
No, but it's a director who's ambitious. The funders gave him the leeway.
So okay,
that's what Adrian Brody.
But
as
you're just stating
would want.
facts. You're just like, okay, here, terrible director. Hey, he's a terrible director, but he just wanted to make a movie, and so he made a movie. What are you going to say?
That's
to
how you
him?
get the room.
No, I'm not.
That's how you get Megalopolis.
I'm not saying that he's a terrible director.
But you could see the analogy, yes?
In a circumstance, but you could. What do you mean?
You could see the analogy, though. Yes.
Yes,
or no?
your analogy, I can see it.
Okay.
Sure.
Cool.
I just want to throw a couple. I just want to throw a couple more.
I think you don't get it.
I just want to throw a couple more words at you, and you just tell me if these.
Just
I think
because
you don't
there is
get
an
it, bro.
analogy that you can draw doesn't absolve the movie
The director,
from being
director also said that was the analogy, but yeah.
a poorly told story.
All right, I'm gonna throw a couple more
Not
words
a
at
poorly
you,
told story,
and let me
man.
tell you if these resonate with you.
Just don't get it, man.
Excruciating,
There we go.
hard-handed, onerous, oppressive.
Onerous.
Oppressive
I'll
feels
go
like a
back.
different word.
Oppressive, yeah. Oppressive's not one.
It's not.
I don't think that.
That's the different thing.
Like an
I feel
oppressive
like.
atmosphere. Trust me, it checks out.
He's a doctor.
Maybe society
I am.
misuses oppressive. Then that's more likely. While he's looking, I got some half-ass research.
Oh,
Yeah, I got it.
Here it is,
Liam's
here it is.
got some half.
I
Bleak,
got two of them that were interesting.
bleak,
to me.
intemperate, agonizing, wretched, insufferable,
All right, we've
harrowing,
heard enough.
tortuous.
We've heard enough.
Anyways,
Okay.
that's how I feel about the movie.
Liam, hit
First
me.
movie in Western filmmaking. Apparently, intermission is common on the Eastern side
Yeah.
of things, right?
where they make long, pretentious movies.
Yeah. First movie in Western filmmaking with an intermission since.
Ten Commandments.
Any guesses?
Ten Commandments was 19.
Who's a director that makes insanely long movies?
Oh, it's good. It's got to be like The Irishman or something.
Good guess. Another director that makes like really, really long movies. Quentin Tarantino.
Oh,
Okay.
Was it hold on.
Oh,
What's
it's
the
the
stupid
hateful.
one?
It's a hateful eight.
It is the
Okay.
Hateful
That's
Eight.
right. I remember that.
It is the Hateful Eight. Then this was interesting to me because this doesn't make sense. Adrian Brody was not originally supposed to be Lazo Toth, which is weird because
He
I
was
feel like he was
supposed to be Guy Pearce?
perfect for Lazo Toth. No, Joel Edgerton was supposed to be Lazo Toth.
Oops.
Joel Edgerton's the brother in Warrior. Tom Hardy
Oh
and Joel Edgerton.
wow.
This wouldn't really like.
He didn't seem Jewish at all.
I know.
Adrian Brody, if I'm not
Looks
mistaken,
like a Middle Eastern. Looks like a
he
Eastern
Jewish?
European Jew. Unclear.
I don't wanna-
But he
I
certainly
don't wanna
looks like an
assume.
Eastern European Jew.
He has all the stereotypes.
He definitely
He's
has the
skinny.
schnoz.
He's skinny, and he's got a. Okay, this brings up another point. What was the whole talk about his nose at the beginning?
I think he injured it.
He
in
broke
the
his
camp.
nose. Yeah, his nose was
but
broken.
it was so unclear to me.
Yeah.
Um,
Then
Like, and I'm pretty sure the fact that we're all sitting here like questioning whether that was the truth.
did
or
he
not.
break it again?
oh,
At some
so
point
he
during
did
the
get a
movie?
Golden Globe for The Brutalist.
Brody did.
Golden Globe for Best Actor.
Brody did, yeah.
A Golden Globe though is
But he
Is it
did get
joke?
nominated for the Oscar, which went
He
to
did.
Emilia Perez.
the Oscars
They gave a
dumpster
man.
fire.
They gave a man
No, they didn't,
Best
they didn't
Actress.
award it yet.
Yeah, but
Emilia Perez?
she's
No,
gonna win.
The Oscars didn't happen yet.
No, he's nominated, but that's the shoe-in.
But it's a Best Actress, though.
Yes.
Yeah. So he's
Oh,
okay. So,
boy.
so his
and
his
this is
mother,
what you want to gauge things off of.
so
Liam.
his mother is actually
cares
from,
so much
His mother's
about the
actually from
Oscars.
Budapest.
Okay.
So his mother's from Budapest, and his
Emilia
dad
Perez,
is
I
from
cannot defend.
is a Polish Jew. So
Why not? Why can't you defend that movie?
We're not going to get into that. Although I will say, even the communities
hold on,
don't support Emilia Perez. I'll
Pause.
just leave it at that.
Pause.
Okay.
As a child, Brody performed magic shows at children's birthday parties as the amazing Adrian.
That is
That's
great.
amazing.
I would rather see
That
videos
didn't
of
come
that.
up in my half-ass research. That didn't come up.
I would rather see videos of that, honestly.
I'd love to see videos of that.
But yeah, the Joel Edgerton one was weird because I feel like he's, Joel Edgerton.
Yeah, I
What
I
else
would
is
not-
Guy Pearce in?
Guy Pearce is-
Memento.
he's in
It's been a long
Memento.
time since I watched
He's
it.
in The Count of Monte Cristo.
I don't think I've ever watched that one.
He is.
Yeah, I know what he looks like.
Oh,
Oh,
you know
Joel
Joel
Edgerton. Sorry,
George.
I thought you were showing me Guy Pearce.
And he's getting mad at me.
I was like, you're showing me a picture of Guy Pearce. I just saw him in a movie. No, I've
That
never
was-
seen that guy in my life.
Guy
Now,
Pearce
Guy
is
Pearce
in
is
a
not.
lot.
He's not in. Like he may be in like more niche ones. Like he's not in like blockbusters a whole lot.
No.
I know.
anymore.
I look. And he's the
No.
magic of the internet called Imdim.
He was in a movie called like the Time Machine.
Yeah, like stuff like that.
Like H.G. Wells time
he
machine?
had a run in like the
No.
late '90s
Yeah,
where he was a pretty big deal.
early 2000s.
Yeah.
Was he the main character in Memento?
Yes.
Okay, yeah.
That was his biggest.
Yeah.
That and Count of Monte Cristo. He played Fernand Mondego.
Harrison
right,
Lee
that's
Van
right.
Buren Sr. What a name. When he said Van Buren, I thought they were talking about like Martin Van Buren.
Yeah, I listened to a podcast about the Brutalist, and they said that name was so ridiculous. Like he might as well have been named George Washington Trump. Like, just take all like the old money names.
That's
and just combine
what
them.
it felt like. That's definitely what it felt like. He was in Alien Covenant. Oh, he's Peter Wayland.
Yeah, that's right. He's Wayland. Okay, I knew
Okay.
he had some
I was
tie
like,
to
I
those
swear
movies.
I've seen him in something else.
Yeah, and he's in Prometheus too. As the,
He's Aldrich Killian in Iron Man 3.
Yes, that's right. He's Killian.
Is he really?
How do you think he felt when he just opens his mouth and breathes fire for no reason? That was the dumbest moment I think one of the dumbest moments I've ever seen in a movie where he's just like, you're like,
He did that.
yeah,
Yeah, he
because he
breathes
takes
fire.
like the what do they call it? Not the Inferno, whatever the pill that gives him like the nanobots.
He creates
and
something.
so he can like breathe fire, and so he's literally just like sitting there, arms folded, just opens his mouth, and just like little jet of CGI flame comes out. I'm like, that might be the worst thing I've ever seen in a superhero movie. That was an embarrassment.
Out of the first three phases, like when Marvel was
That was
good,
one of the worst.
That was one of the worst. It was like down there with like, man, we don't watch.
Yeah, I don't
those.
even think I watched Iron Man 3.
Yeah.
That was like Thor: Dark World.
Oh, that movie was what a snooze fest.
Yeah.
How do you make a superhero movie that boring?
I know.
Speaking of snooze fest,
Oh, he's in the King's Speech.
So
he was
what?
the king in the King's Speech. One of the
No.
kings in the
Oh.
King's Speech.
Oh, he
King
was.
Edward VIII.
Oh, he was. Okay, he wasn't the main one.
No. Not he wasn't that king.
I've never
but he
seen
was
that.
in
I've
the
actually
King's
never
Speech.
seen that movie.
It's in the Hurt Locker. So he's been in a lot of. He's been in
Damn.
some
All right,
big
yeah.
movies.
I was unfamiliar.
So what do we think about long movies? Like just in general, what are your thoughts? Do you guys have rules on long movies? If a movie's long, it's got to be whatever. Is it just does it not matter at all? Like it's like if I'm locking in for a movie, it can be however long it needs to be.
It has to be able to hold my interest. So I find that the vast majority of the time when I watch a movie that is over 2 hours long, it is because it has unnecessary fat that could have been trimmed. When I was like, this part took too... So Guardians of the Galaxy 3, which I thought was a really fun movie. The whole Among Us part where they're in the different colored spacesuits and they go to the planet, that part could have been cut from the movie. You wouldn't have lost a single thing. So whenever a movie wastes my time,
Yeah.
I don't like it. And I find that longer movies, at least nowadays, especially, that's why Lord of the Rings does not waste your time at all.
Right.
Every single scene has to be there. And even the 3 hours is like the truncated version. Even in the extended edition, there's everything is there.
The movie's
that
about as
is-
close to
yeah.
perfect with its time
Yeah.
as any movie
It's-
can
and,
be.
and to me, it's like, how long does a movie feel? And we've watched hour-and-a-half movies that felt interminably long. I'll tell you,
we got to name a
I
few.
think the movie
What
that
were-
felt
what
the
were ones?
longest was Transformers 4. That movie was actually 3 hours long, and it felt like it was 20 hours long.
There's a couple
It
of
just
the-
felt
the
like it
Disney
would
movies
never
felt-
end. Yeah, the Disney live actions all felt
Yeah.
like they would just
Yeah.
never.
There was a
end.
few of those. I think that's what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
Because we've done a few on the show where we were like, man, I just could barely make it
Yeah.
through that thing.
Which is why now, when I look at the runtime and I see, oh, hour and 30 minutes, I'm like, great, because even if it's bad, I can tolerate it for that long.
Yeah.
But then when we go and see a movie that I don't enjoy, that's 3 hours or 4 hours long, I'm like, man, I could have done so much other stuff in this time.
No, it's brutal
So,
when
yeah,
it's bad.
it's just yeah.
I thought The
'Cause it's like,
Irishman
'cause
was
the-
one of the worst examples of that.
yeah.
That
Because
was
like
so
I
brutal.
won't walk out of a movie that I'm okay. So I'll give you an example. I watched Pushpa, right? That movie was 3 hours and 10 minutes long, and I did take several bathroom breaks, but I did not feel like the movie was dragging
Yeah.
because it moved from scene to scene. Stuff was happening, so I never felt like it was dragging. So both the first and second part are 3 hours long, but a lot of stuff happens. Like it moves from scene to scene, and every scene in there is progressing the story forward. And yeah, it was ridiculous, but every scene stuff was happening. A lot of the really long movies I could point to say this could have been shorter, this could have been shorter, cut this out, trim this down. Like I feel like I could go in and make a fan edit and keep all the essential parts, not lose anything, and show it to someone else, and they'd be like, yeah, that is the exact same movie, but it just didn't waste
Yeah.
an extra hour of my time.
I think you got to adjust your mindset a little bit going into it.
Yeah, and
Just to like, okay,
look,
I need to be in the right state of mind.
And
to
I
watch
don't
this
mind
sort of
watching long, talky movies. Okay, one of my favorite movies I ever watched, which I really need to go back, was Good Night and Good Luck, and that is just talking. And I legitimately thought it was an old movie, like it came out in 2000 something, because it's shot only in black and white, and it's about radio during the time of McCarthyism. And I thought it was an old movie because it was all in black and white, but it was actually a more modern movie. But I thought it was really good, and it was like 2 hours of just people talking. So I can tolerate that if it's well done. And this sort of thing is just like so bleak and depressing. I'm like, I'd rather do anything else. And that's the problem. If it's like bleak and depressing for 3 hours, I'm having a miserable time. Like, I'd rather not do, because again, and I'm not saying there's no room for films like this to exist. Tuskegee Airmen, great movie, made me cry. Terribly sad movie. But, you know, it's a good story that needed to be told. But for a movie to be 4 hours long, when movies are supposed to be entertainment, and to be just depressing and bleak and no light at the end of the tunnel, just doesn't do it for me.
We know I'm fine with that.
Yeah. Oh, we know you're fine with
Yeah.
that.
So you can see how
Is it a Catholic thing?
I don't want to unpack it too much.
Well, we're trying to keep it on the topic of length. So what about you, Lee? Like, what something's long, less about the depressing
I'll
portion.
say like the Charlton Heston 10 Commandments. That's 4 hours long. And that's a great movie.
Yeah. I mean, I would mirror a lot of what Nathanael said. I would say, like, I need to find the right time of the week, of the day, to be like, okay, slow burn, I'm in for it. And I can usually compartmentalize really well and just be like, okay, here we go. So I understand there's times to trim fat, but like some of my favorite movies of recent have been long. And I know that's the way movies are going nowadays, which isn't the greatest trend, but unfortunately all the other movies are really bad. So
Yep.
a lot of the
Yep,
longer
that's
movies
true.
recently
Can't
happen
really
to
argue with
be
that.
some of my favorites of recent time. Like Dune's pretty long. Oppenheimer's super long, and that's probably my
Yeah.
favorite movie the last 2 years. And then this is super long. So, I mean, it's a trend that I don't love, but it just happens that a lot of the best movies of the last couple of years are going that way. So I'm
Have
gonna
been
watch
really
it.
long, biopic-y type,
So I'm gonna watch it.
slice of life dramas.
Yeah, and maybe that's like a contrast to all the crap that we have to
Yeah,
deal with.
it's like
maybe it doesn't
a
hit-
reaction to all
Yeah.
the schlocky sci-fi pew pew pew
maybe
laser
maybe I'm more
garbage.
fine with it. Like if I was like if it was I don't know, late 90s, which is a golden age for movies,
Right.
maybe these sort of movies would be way more off-putting. for
Yeah, I'd
me.
rather just watch Shawshank Redemption.
Sure. Yeah. How long is Shawshank? I mean, it's long, but it's not.
It's
Even
not
that's
like,
not.
I think I want to say it's like 2 hours.
a little over 2.
It's probably a little over 2. Very.
Green Mile was like an early, like that was pretty long. Green Mile. That was like long for its time.
It's 2
for
hours and
sure.
22, so it's a
But
longer
that's-
movie.
That would be short.
Let me see
nowadays,
Green
though.
Mile. Yeah, that's average now.
Green Mile's pretty long.
Green Mile is 3 hours and 9
Yeah,
minutes.
Green
so
Mile's pretty long. I
again,
love Green
and
Mile.
again,
I
yeah.
absolutely
So
love Green Mile.
it's not that there can't be movies that are that long. It's just that they have to really be exceptional
Right.
to be that long.
I think it's understandable.
I think if you're not at 8+, you have to be 2 hours or less. Or I will say you should have been more. If you don't have, again, and I really think is like if you can cut it and lose nothing from the story, you need to cut it.
Yeah.
Because it is actually it is a skill to edit it, right? A lot of movies are saved on the editing room floor, and I think a lot of movies that would be much more charitable if they had been sharper with their editing. That's one of the reasons I love like Scott Pilgrim. That movie is so sharply edited; it does not waste a single second.
Yeah.
Right.
And there are other movies where I would say every single scene in that movie is deliberate. I think Edgar Wright does a really good job of that generally in his movies, and so does Wes Anderson.
Yeah.
Those are both very deliberate directors, and so you don't get a lot of wasted time in their movies. Which doesn't mean you don't have longer shots and lingering shots and pauses and silences, but they're used very deliberately.
I think. Have you ever seen No Country for Old Men?
Yeah. Yeah.
Does that feel like what you
Always
just said?
Brendo.
Like I think there's a lot of scenes in that are super slow, probably don't necessarily need to be in it, but it felt like the pace was really good.
What's the runtime in No Country for Old Men?
Probably pretty long. Even that, like the ending. I don't know if you remember the ending.
Yeah, I do.
The ending. A
Great
lot of
movie.
people are like, "Why is this even an end?" Like,
2
it just-
hours.
2 hours.
Oh, it's only
Like
2
on the
hours.
dot, yeah,
Okay,
it's only
well,
2
then I
hours.
guess it's
Yeah, and that's the
minimized.
thing. A movie can movie pacing of a movie can be slower, but for me, it's all about the intention of that. Like, is it just right? So a lot of times you get these just gratuitous scenes. Like, I didn't need to see Guy Pearce raping Adrian Brody for 5 minutes, right?
Yeah.
You could have just showed me the initiation and the aftermath, or just implied it, and I would have gotten the entire effect. So that part was to me very gratuitous, and I think intentionally so. And here's one thing, and again, this I don't want to bring this up as a problem I have with the movie, because this really would be a problem about how people are taking the movie, and this is where I would need the director to tell me what his intentions were, because I think you can read it in two ways to say like, hey, this was a very realistic look of how immigrants were treated in the 60s, or in the early 50s and 60s. And I think people will come into that and say, "Oh, look how bad immigrants have it in America right now." It's like these are not the same. We are 60 years
That'd
past
be
this. You
an
really think this is the
insane,
same, right? Like you really think that would happen today? So
I would hope that's not.
I would really hope that's not the intention.
Yeah.
In fact, again, I think if the message is like America's rotten, go back to your home country, that's like an anti-immigration message. So I think the overall message of the movie was a little muddled for me, and I need the director to clear some things up of like, what was I supposed to? If I get frustrated with a movie if it's not clear what I'm supposed to take away. And again, even if I disagree with it, as long as it's clear what the point of the movie is, which of course in Heretic, I completely disagree with the point of the movie, which was, religion is all false, but as long as it makes you feel good. I'm like, no, you're an idiot. Go back to grade school.
Well, before we get too far from the subject of length, just to touch on some of the stuff that you guys have said, I definitely think that a movie that allows itself to be as long as it is subjects itself to be critiqued harder, if that makes sense. Like if you're a movie that is, again, so you and I watched Presence, Nathaniel. And
I think that movie was as long as it needed to be.
Right.
And that to me is like the limit. And that's really, it's very going to be context dependent. A movie should only be as long as it needs to be to do what it intends to do. Lord of the Rings is a long, multi-year, massive epic. And so you need a lot of time to be able to unpack all those things. Because we've also seen movies that were rushed. And you're like, wait, you completely skipped over this, that, and the other thing.
Right.
You need to actually take time to flesh this out. Now, usually when that happens, you're like, okay, you spent all this time doing this, which meant nothing. Why didn't you spend that time telling me about this character and why they're doing what they're doing?
My point being that we could watch a movie like Presence, which again, this is just to clue the audience in a little bit. This movie is essentially all shot on a GoPro. It might not be a GoPro, but it's a wide angle lens. It floats through this house, observing conversations that are constantly happening throughout the house.
It never steps out of the house.
Yeah.
Well,
and the camera
right at the end, but
itself,
it never steps out of the house.
audience is essentially this spirit, this presence that is watching this whole story. It feels more like a student film. It's an hour and 20 minutes, but regardless of how good or bad that movie could be, its potential to be bad is only limited to the fact that it's an hour and 20 minutes.
Yeah.
Maybe it is a terrible hour and 20 minute movie, but it was fine. Like I thought that movie was fine. If that movie was 3 hours and 45 minutes, I would have thought it's probably 10 times worse than The Brutalist. Like, it just didn't have enough there to hold it.
Yeah.
But just imagine, like, and just for you specifically, Nathaniel, and at home if you ever watch it, just imagine if all of those scenes that you saw in that movie were like 10 minutes long instead of like the 40 seconds long.
So zone of interest?
Yeah, well, and that's my whole point. Like, my whole point is that just because you slap a whole bunch of amazing actors in there and then you put these really gratuitous scenes in there, I think you still leave yourself open to harsh critique when you make a movie as long as you've made it. And to bring up an example, because I thought the No Country for Old Men example was pretty good. And it kind of proved my point in the sense that movie's great. It's 2 hours and it tells everything it needs to tell.
That movie rules.
But there are moments, like Nathaniel mentioned, that you do need. So you guys, did you ever watch Ghostbusters with us? You watched the series or just like one?
I
or
think
two?
I watched.
watched
I think I
most-
watched.
you watched all of them.
I think you might have
watched.
watched. Yeah, because you did the podcast with it.
Yeah,
like,
which
the
I still
podcast
haven't
before.
published.
Yeah,
It'll
yeah.
get there eventually.
It's
It's on the. I have
about
it.
that.
I have it. Hold on. I have it on my to-do list.
That's insane. That was like a year.
That was
and
like
a
2
half.
years ago.
That was like
I
I was gonna say
have-
3
let's
years
see.
ago.
I have
that was very year.
Clear audio backlog. It's on my to-do list.
All right, so my purpose is, okay, so the first Ghostbusters, there is this scene where they all get in this elevator, right? And they're going up to the top floor. It's like the 60th floor. So they all get in there with their ridiculous-looking suits, and they're all just kind of sitting there, and their eyes are just bouncing back and forth, and the music is playing, and they're waiting. And then one of them kind of looks at the backpack, and he asks the dude, forget which one it is that makes him, but
Fankman.
he's like, hey, Fankman, what are these things made of? Or like, what? And he basically is like, well, if they explode, there'll be a 20,000 neutron, blah, blah, blah. And he just explains how devastating it would be if any of these things malfunction. And they just stare over at him, and they both kind of take a small step away, and then the scene continues for another like minute of just them sitting there awkwardly looking around. In my opinion, that's a beautifully shot scene.
It's a good comedic.
It's an amazing because the scene needed to drag on there, like for the humor, for the purpose of it to hit. And it doesn't always have to be humor, and it can be suspense, it can be a lot of different things. But if a shot has purpose in being much longer than it needed to be, other than I would just want you to see more of my masterpiece, because I can't figure out why, other than that, some of these movies that we watch are that long. And I think that's why they open themselves up to being critiqued so hard, because I don't think I would be going through this movie with tweezers and going, all right, all these things didn't make sense, this was bad, if it was a normal length. Because from somebody that does produce some kind of film, I don't make movies, the hardest part is cutting it down. Like you always, when you have a vision, you put it onto paper, you get it onto film, it's gonna be like 4 times the length it should be. And then you have to have friends, you have to have people alongside you, editors, to come along and say, hey, listen, they call it cutting the baby. We've got to cut your baby, like because it's your baby, but this part has to happen.
Yeah.
And we get so many of these directors that are backtracking from that and going, no, I just think that I'm good enough to keep the whole thing, and that bothers me, because then I have to watch it. Because then I have to watch it, and unless it's necessary, it's really good. Then I'm like, okay, well, you've left yourself open.
That is
to
one of the
critique.
biggest things that you see a trend in Hollywood is directors, and this happened to George Lucas too.
Yeah.
Is directors will do their first couple movies, and someone will be in their pocket saying, "Hey, make sure you cut this out, trim it down. It's too long. You need to focus on this." And then they get really popular, really successful. So the studios say, "Go do whatever you want to." And then you look at their Megalopolis is a great example. When a creative person is completely unfettered, if they don't have the discipline, which a lot of people just don't, because it's like, again, the line is kill your babies, because you have to be willing to make the cuts that are necessary. Otherwise, you're going to end up with a sloppy mess.
What's the greatest Star Wars ever made? Like
None of them.
The original trilogy.
Well, yeah, like what's typically renowned as the best one
Empire?
of all of them?
Empire.
Only one not directed by George Lucas.
Wow, it's interesting.
It's because he
But
said,
the whole original trilogy is excellent.
yes, and it's all good. I'm not saying that
didn't
George
know
Lucas
that.
did a
Who
bad
did it?
job.
Do you know?
It's his buddy.
That's
Yeah,
and
his ex-wife Martha Lucas did a lot of heavy editing to put it into the film that we all know and love. And then the prequels, which again I think have some strong points. Again, compared to the sequel trilogy, so if the original trilogy was like 5-star restaurant meal, then the prequel trilogy was like we went to an Applebee's. It was good, but maybe it wasn't great for you. A little messy. Maybe not the most.
I love the prequel.
I know you do. I know you do.
They look really good compared to the new.
But not the most well prepared thing.
Yeah.
And then we go to the sequel trilogies, and it's like the dumpster outside a dog shit.
It's like
retention
Popeyes
center.
when everyone's yelling at you and they're pissed that you're here.
It's like Long John Silver. It's like, has anyone ever actually eaten like a fast food?
No, they're still
Like,
around though.
Yeah.
Long John Silver. That's actually pretty
Yeah.
great.
Well, I think I would agree with all of you guys. I think it lies.
But my point was the prequels are messy because George kind of got to do his own thing and didn't have anyone just. And it's not even like someone giving him oversight saying you can't do this, but just someone on his side saying, hey, this idea sounds a little bit out there. Maybe you should rein this part in, trim this. You need someone who you trust. Who you trust to have a good
even
because stuff in your head always sounds good, and then when you put it on paper, you're like, wait a minute, this might be I might be a moron.
But even to have the humility to say,
Yes.
I've written this thing. The first one was excellent. It changed cinema forever.
Fundamentally changed
It's
cinema.
one of the most. It might be the most ground-shaking movie ever made. As far as like Hollywood was essentially nothing, and then that movie was made, and it just changed the landscape of everything. And then he made the sequel to it. And he could have been like, dude, I'm the hottest thing on the planet. Everybody's going to eat out of my hands. And he's like, hey, he went to his friend and he said, I think you need to direct this because I actually think you're a better director. And I'm going to write it and I'm going to have my creative input, but you need to go direct this thing. And it's considered the best one out of any Star Wars that's made.
And I really feel like if he had stuck with that and been like, hey, let me write it and then let someone who I trust do the direction. And with me there to make sure that it's all still, with my vision. So the person who's done this is the live action One Piece. The guy who writes One Piece, his name is Oda. And he's renowned for being very hands-on when it comes to, and I mean, One Piece is there's One Piece everything, but he's renowned for having making sure that he gets creative say, like final creative say. Like he will let people do stuff, but he's always like, hey, here's what you need to do for this. Here's why I did this. Here's what this person is like. And so he had like the actors for One Piece, for the live action One Piece, got to meet the voice actors for their characters and talk to Oda about here's what your character is like. Here's their personality, here's their motivations and their goals, and here's how you play them. And then they go, and that's why the One Piece live action anime is actually really good. And people are like, wait, a live action anime that's actually good? It's like, yeah, because the creator maintained allowed them to make the changes necessary, but stayed on to make sure that it was still, unlike Cowboy Bebop, like it was still what he had intended and what everyone wanted was his original vision for the series, but tweaked to the needs of a live action television series.
And I think that like you're always going to find that effort put in is going to yield good results. And I don't think there are a lot of examples of that not creating a good movie, even if it's like, maybe not a bad movie, even if it's a movie that you wouldn't think would hold a lot of water. When effort is put into those movies, like I think of Pacific Rim, the first one, all the time, whereas that could have just been a silly monster movie mashing, characters together with your hands, like a silly whatever. But they were intentional about that movie to make every shot in this largely, I mean, probably 80%, 90% CGI. I mean, it's just like all these huge, fantastical shots. But they shot the whole movie as if it was shot on real cameras from real perspectives. So even all the shots of the robots, it's like shot out of a window, pointing up at the robot. It's shot like as if it was a drone shot. It's not just buzzing around in a three-dimensional space, even though that's what they were shooting.
Transformers.
Well, yeah, Transformers and the next Pacific Rim after that was horrible.
I never watched that one.
But my point is, like,
it looked like Transformers.
Pacific Rim's great. It's not like a groundbreaking movie in any way. But you can tell, wow, that effort was recognized. The fact that you chose to do that and everything made me feel like this was a little bit more real. Like it just drew me in more to a movie that was essentially about giant robots fighting each other.
I will say, the point of like, well, these robots are just so big it takes two people's brains to power. I'm like, what is the size? what is that? They were just.
It was based off a manga, right?
I don't know.
No?
I think it's just an homage of Gundam and kaiju stuff.
Yeah,
And
okay.
what I really appreciated about it was the everything that was supposed to be big actually felt big. Unlike Transformers,
Right.
where they're just like romping around in someone's yard and then they're just gone.
But and obviously the Lord of the Rings being the prime.
We still have to
example
watch
of this,
Transformers 1, by the way, which apparently was good.
prime example of this being like
animated.
Yeah, the new animated one was apparently good.
It was good.
being just the most effort you could possibly put into a movie is and I think as a reflection you get movies that will never be made again like
Yeah.
because you're like well people just by definition you can't Hollywood will not allow you to put that much
Yeah.
effort into a movie like it just doesn't have the money in it anymore whereas they were at the time were like hey let's spend almost 2 years in New Zealand filming most
But
shoots are
even
done
that
in like
didn't
a couple
cost
months,
as much
6
as
weeks.
like modern movies cost. Let me
It's
see.
just
Let me
crazy.
see what the budget was for the Lord of the Rings trilogy.
And it's not again. That's not me saying that this movie put no effort in. That's not me saying there's nothing good about this movie. None of that is. I'm just saying when you make a longer movie, it leaves yourself open to be critiqued more. And I think
Okay,
that's
there's no
typically where I
shot.
come out a little more harsh.
It's saying the budget for the entire trilogy was $281 million. So it's like $500 million today for 3 movies that are 3 hours long apiece.
Dude, it was all shot in New Zealand,
That's
and it was like
insanity.
the Weta Workshop. Like they
That is
were
insanity.
super. Now Weta Workshop is humongous, but at the time, they like the movie is what blew up all of the things that they used. Like all of those places that made all the weapons,
Yeah.
that did all the digital animation, blew up after like post Lord of the Rings because it made them
Right.
famous. But they were just little factions in New Zealand. Like it was.
Yeah, but
just
the fact
amazing
that they could
movies.
make for $500 million the best trilogy ever put to film,
Yeah.
and probably 3 of the best movies ever put to film, and that for $500 million you made Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, and you're like, so I assume there has to be money laundering. Like there's got to be
it's just
something sketchy and illegal going on because where the
No,
hell
I'm
is this
telling
money
you,
going?
I'm telling you, it's the same. It's the pretentious that it's people going, oh well, I have to be getting X amount, and I'm telling you, it's
Yeah.
the directors, the actors, all of them being so far, like so high on their own junk
I also
that
feel
they're
like
just
there's
like
this ironic
this is how
edge
much
to it
I
where
need to be paid.
where studio heads are like, oh, this isn't testing well. We need to do all these reshoots, which adds millions and millions of dollars to the budget, and then
Yeah.
it still doesn't fail to make money back. So it costs twice as much as it should have, and you still didn't make your money back. So, and I feel like the problem is like you're hiring people who are not talented, both directors and scriptwriters, actors or whatever. Actors are actors, whatever. But you're hiring directors who do not have the chops for it. You're hiring writers who are absolute hacks and can't see outside of their own bubble.
yeah,
And then you're saying, and then people are watching the movie and saying, "Wow, this is shit." And so you're saying, "Okay, you need to go back and recut it." So it's not. So did you see the Captain America? They basically scrapped the entire movie and reshot the whole thing.
yeah.
And then Anthony Mackie comes out and says, "What does Captain America mean? Not America.
Yeah.
He represents a lot of things, just not America." I'm like, bro, your name is Captain America. And I think Anthony Mackie's a good actor, but
They gotta put
maybe
a
you should
muzzle
just
on
yeah.
some
I
of
was
these
like,
actors during
maybe
their tour.
he should just be kept in. Maybe they need to put him in the Bastille. Like they need to man in the Iron
Sorry,
Mask him.
man.
They need to man in the Iron
Shut
Mask
up.
him until that movie comes out.
It's like
But-
the Snow White girl.
yeah.
Shut up.
Yeah, she and Rachel
girl-
Zegler. Yeah, Rachel Zegler
girl is
and Anthony Mackie probably need to put in the Bastille until.
It's just like, hey, say that maybe after the movie is out, and you want to like you're just turning people away, which is never a good business idea.
and she's like 23. Like, what do you know? You
Yeah,
know
she
literally
sucks.
nothing.
She's literally been in no good movies ever.
All right, so let's give our last thoughts here on the Brutalist, and then we'll rank it, and then we'll talk about what's happening at our next show.
What is
So,
happening on our next show? I legitimately have no idea.
No, we do. We're going to be watching. We're going to be watching the heist movie.
Oh,
Den
that's
of
right.
Thieves?
Dog
Den
Days.
of, Den of
Oh,
Thieves.
Den of Thieves.
Dog Days.
We're going to be watching
No,
Den of
I
Thieves
swear one
1
of them
at
was called
home
Dog
and Den of
Days.
Thieves 2 in theaters, or at home
See
if we
where
don't
it's
catch it in
streaming.
time because I have Pub TV and it's got everything. So
Ew.
It's
We're
de-
good.
that's there's definitely something illegal about that. Let's see, where's it streaming? It looks like it's on HBO Max. So
Then if the original one,
I have it on Pub TV, dog.
number 2 most searched crime movie. That makes sense.
with Den of Thieves.
41% on Rotten Tomatoes, 7 out of 10 on IMDb. So
For
the original one.
It'll float around in there. It's
we'll
got
see.
some
I like
decent
Gerard
actors.
Butler. We'll see.
Heist movies are cool.
yeah, I'm
We'll
down.
see.
It's not The Town, so who knows if Liam will like it, but
Nothing ever will be. We'll never see.
I
another
actually
The
love
Town.
that part of. I like that part of your movie love way more than your love for pretentious movies. Is your love?
I don't like a
your
lot
love-
of pretentious movies.
Well, that's
I
why.
will say that.
That's why I didn't know. To be honest,
I think there's a time and a place.
I'm more shocked that you didn't like that you didn't like Zone of Interest than that you liked because
That
because
was
I
unforgivable.
It was I was so happy that day walking out of the theater because I was fuming. I mean that movie
was way cross. Whatever
An
line there is
abomination.
was way over.
apparently crossed the line because even Liam liked it, so didn't like it. So I was fine, but so I'm fuming.
reviled it.
I'm not saying anything, and then Liam just goes, "That movie was dog shit," and I'm so I'm like, "Oh, thank God," because then we just sat there and raged about it for like 20 minutes.
No, that movie sucked. dude.
But more than that, I appreciate your love for movies that have just really solid Boston accents. And then
it's my favorite. It's my
the
favorite.
blood.
Can we call
It's
it
the blood.
a subgenre?
We'll call it
of the movie?
nepotism. Yeah, the subgenre, the Bastin. The Bastin. It's just
so
Bastin.
good.
the movies,
Yeah.
we'll call them the
We're
movies.
calling the pork roll subgenre.
I'm in.
All right, so we kind of gave our general ideas, but give us your closing thoughts on Brutalist, Nathaniel.
Again, I respect the movie a lot more than I enjoyed it. I found it to be a very miserable experience. I thought there were some interesting things. So the idea of here's this kind of architecture that is designed to be strictly last forever, and it has no care to aesthetics. And to say, how can I make beauty out of that while still maintaining the function and using negative space and light and things like that? I think that's a really interesting idea. And they spent maybe 10 minutes on that.
Yeah.
And that was the interesting part of the movie to me. And then the whole epilogue of like, here's why he designed it. And like him and his wife, I'm like, okay, that's really touching and poignant. Why was that not in the movie? So the epilogue really, really frustrated me. So if it had just ended before the epilogue, I would have been like, well, that was depressing. I'm never watching that again. But then the epilogue made me actively angry. It was like, so there was some really good, interesting things in here, and you just left those to the very end because you couldn't figure out how to put them in the actual movie. So I was very disappointed after the epilogue.
How about you?
I would say there's a time and a place for a movie like this. I would say in the landscape of 2024 movies, which was a horrendous year for movies, this is going to be one of my top ones of the year. And I would say it was an acting.
Except it's 2025, you dingus.
It's still
It came out.
It's
It's
still
considered
it's still
2024. though.
2024.
You are right,
Oh,
but
okay,
it's considered a
fine.
2024 movie.
Fine.
Not that I won't care about the Oscars anymore. But
No, well, that wasn't even an Oscar.
this guy loves the Oscars.
Hey, I'll be watching.
Wait for Amelia
I'll be
Perez to
watching.
sweep it
No, that's such
he
bullshit.
won the Golden Globe for Best Actress.
Yeah.
Yes,
right.
something that I
He
never
won
thought-
the
Did he
Golden-
actually?
Yes.
Oh, that's
he
what you were
won the
saying
Golden
before.
Globe for Best Actress.
I thought you were saying Brody won.
No.
But Brody's, they're in different
Brody won
categories,
Best
though.
Actor.
Yeah, right,
and the
right,
Amelia Perez guy
And we
won for Best Actress,
can
which is a
expect a
slap in the
similar-
face to women everywhere.
Even though
Yeah, they should be
actor
pissed.
just implies what you're doing, like if you act and
and
you are
Trump
an
just
actor.
put up the executive order, like men are men and women are women. So I think that Golden Globe is nullified.
Yeah.
Just for future reference.
Yeah, doesn't fit. Acting masterclass by Adrian Brody. Guy Pearce was phenomenal. I was in the right mindset when I watched this movie, and I think you need to be in order to appreciate it. But overall, not a perfect movie, but I really enjoyed it.
Okay. Yeah, I think I'm probably sounding more critical because I think it's longer, and like I mentioned, I think when a movie gets this long, it leaves itself open to be critiqued harsher. So again, like I said, when I came out of the intermission, I looked at Nathanael. I was like, hey, I think I'm kind of liking it. I really like the idea, and I talked to Andrew. I said, I like the idea of somebody who's incredibly talented getting recognized by somebody. And it was, he had that meeting with Guy Pearce, and he's like, hey, look, I'm sorry, I messed up, and you're phenomenal. Like you should have led with that, and they kind of laugh about it. All that's great, but it just lingered on too much for my liking. Not a movie I'd ever recommend to anybody ever. Just very uncomfortable, and I think if I could insert some things that I think might have helped it, it would be to have some kind of polished story about him, like finishing it off. Because if the story was about him, and then the epilogue at the end just made it seem like, hey, it's about this piece of work he created. Whereas I would have liked his venture back to Israel to have been like, hey, show me a little bit of like why that was a good choice, and show, even if your message is still America sucks, that's fine, but show me why. Like go, because as far as I know, he's just an opium addict who cheated on his wife a lot, and he got sexually assaulted, and his wife got beat even though she was a cripple, and none of it went anywhere. And I was like, okay, well, where does your story go? Well, what did you become after all of this? From point A to point B, what did you become? Even if I didn't like where he became, to show that would have been like, oh, this is now a full story, where it just kind of felt like we were just watching, observing something, and then that thing that we were observing ended. So it didn't feel very complete to me. Definitely didn't like the length. There were good moments of it. Do think the acting was great. I do think a lot of the shots, especially the architecture stuff was really cool. Probably a well-made movie if it was 2 hours and 20 minutes. But because it's so long, I can't give it those points. So those are my thoughts. So let's go through our
You don't need to start at the bottom. It's better than Joker 2. It's better than Heretic. It's better than... Now, here's the question. The problem is, because of the time, if you were like, gun to your head, you have to watch either this movie or Heretic. I'd be like, well, Heretic's an hour and a half less.
It depends on what's the question
So
being asked.
really
what did
depends
you
on-
like more, or what did you what
What
did
I
you
think
rewatch?
was, I would say, what do I rewatch might be a different question from what I think was a better movie.
Okay, let's
because
do
it's
that.
Well,
so
we're all
long.
gonna end up in different places. I might have it lower than you guys.
Yeah,
so
I
we
know
will.
you
We
will.
will start at the bottom. So okay, okay,
Not-
we,
no,
okay.
just
We won't
even
say Joker.
We
won't
will
say
never.
Joker.
We never. Okay, until we find a disaster like that, I don't think we need to mention Joker 2. It is the bottom of
It's
the
the
bottom.
bottom
It
of the
will-
bottom,
I will be shocked if in the next 5 years we find a movie that is worse than that.
I would agree.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm gonna start at Trap.
Brutalist.
I'm right on the edge, guys. I just don't know if Trap was an hour and 30 minutes.
The fact, so that's where the time thing comes in.
It
where it's
matters.
Like, if a gun's to your head and you have to sit down and watch one of these movies, I would watch.
Is
Trap.
that the question?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
The question is, which is the
okay, so
better
that is a
movie?
good point. That is a good point.
Is that
It's
the
not
question?
necessarily.
Yeah, the question is, which is the better movie?
That is a good gauge to use.
I would say Brutalist is a better movie than Trap for sure. Not
I
even a question.
would say that Brutalist is a better movie than Trap. I'll
So
concede.
that's the
So,
question that we're answering.
If I had,
right?
if I was free of time constraints, I didn't have to worry about spending an entire afternoon watching a really, really long movie. I might do the Brutalist over.
However, I still would watch it over Joker 2, even if it's shorter.
Oh, 100%.
Oh,
If Joker
yeah,
2
yeah,
was
yeah,
10
yeah.
minutes long, I would watch this over Joker
and
2.
Brutalist was 4.5
It
hours.
was, yeah,
long.
if Brutalist was 30 hours long and Joker 2 was 10 minutes long, I would watch Brutalist 10 times.
This is rough. All right, we got Monkey Man or
So
Brutalist.
Ugh,
I go Brutalist.
Brutalist. I despised Monkey Man.
We're gonna go We Live in Time or Brutalist.
I could watch We Live in Time.
I'll go Brutalist.
I wasn't a huge fan of that one.
I liked it. But
What about
Brutalist.
Gladiator 2 or Brutalist?
Brutalist?
Brutalist.
I'm gonna go Gladiator 2. That's the line for me
I
where
guess
I'm
Gladiator
just
2,
like,
it's watchable,
it's
but
just-
again,
it's
better,
a-
Brutalist is a better
to
movie
me,
than
Gladiator 2 is a nothing burger. Like
Yeah,
it just
it is a
did
non-movie.
absolutely nothing.
It's a
And for me, I think that Brutalist
Yeah,
has ticked
just
itself
watching
lower.
the Brutalist is just such a painful experience. I might go Gladiator 2. But I think Brutalist is a better movie.
Okay, I definitely did not spell that right.
Brutalist.
Brutalist.
It's not hard. I guess he's
It's
dyslexic.
not hard.
It's not hard.
You absolute dog.
Just do better.
All right, so we have
just read better. I don't know what to tell you.
Heretic or Brutalist.
Oh, I hated Heretic so much.
Brutalist.
Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes or Brutalist.
Brutalist.
These are all bad movies. Again,
They sure
Brutalist was
are.
a,
The whole year
Brutalist was
was.
a miserable experience, but it was a better movie than any of these. But it's just because of how painful it is to watch, at least I can just like numb myself. I can do what Adrian Brody, just shoot up some heroin and watch Planet of the Apes. I do that.
See, these are like the nothing
There's always an
area.
addendum.
Yeah.
These are the nothing areas.
These are
of
nothing
my
burgers.
moves,
I'd rather
and
throw.
that's why
Okay,
I think if Brutalist has notched
how
itself
about this?
below.
I'm deciding which of these two movies gets to live, and the other one gets put in a ditch and shot.
Sure.
King of the Planet of the Apes is getting shot.
Okay. I like that.
The Watchers or the Brutalist.
Brutalist.
I'm shooting the Watchers. That movie was so boring.
Then we have one. Then we have a few that Nathanael and I just. So Reagan, Deadpool, and Twister.
I heard Reagan blew.
Really?
Really?
Yeah.
I enjoyed it.
I listened
Dennis
to movie
Quaid did a
podcasts
good
and said it
job.
was one of the worst movies of the year. I have no idea. I have no
I'm
Jeez,
wondering
I
if
wonder
that's
why.
yeah, I'm wondering if that's just like
A story
because a story about a Republican
No,
president.
they're conservative movie guys.
Really, I thought it was fine. I'm not a big biopic guy, so it's hard for me to
It's a
judge it on that.
biopic. It was virtually.
But I thought it was fine. I didn't know a whole lot about it. I was like, there's some interesting stuff in here, and it wasn't super long. I enjoyed it.
I wrote it off. Maybe I'll watch it.
Deadpool, Twister,
It was fine. Twisters, I love that movie. That was a lot of fun.
You said Deadpool.
Deadpool or Twisters.
Deadpool is.
I'd watch
like
Deadpool
I
again.
like
The
Deadpool.
thing about Deadpool is I don't find them super rewatchable. But Brutalist is not rewatchable at all. So I'd go with Deadpool. But Twisters, I would watch that again. I enjoyed that movie a lot. That was
Who are
fun.
your dialect
I need to watch
coaches? The
Twisters.
Minions.
I haven't seen Twisters yet.
Twisters was fun.
I like Deadpool.
Nosferatu or the Brutalist.
Nosferatu.
Yeah, Nosferatu for sure. Slingshot at the Brutalist.
Brutalist.
I'd give it to Slingshot.
I'd give it to Slingshot.
Even though I didn't like Slingshot.
Wild-
I'd give it to Nosferatu over Slingshot, which I'm pretty sure I
the
said.
Wild Robot.
Wild Robot, 100%. Easy,
Wild
easy,
Robot
easy,
is
easy.
easy. Place
mad,
Beyond
man.
the Pines,
Place Beyond the Pines.
Gladiator.
Gladiator.
Yeah, come on now.
All right. So I have The Brutalist at a 4.0. That's my rating for it. What about you guys?
7-8.
7.8.
See, I have like a quality of like objective quality of filmmaking, and then like a personal enjoyment. My personal enjoyment was like a 3.5, but the quality of movie I think is probably a 7. So I'll give it a 5.
Okay.
I think it's
Go
not a
5.
5 movie, but because like a 5 movie is like that was
It's
just
your rating.
like Gladiator 2. That was a 5 movie. Like it was nothing.
Yeah.
Like Ghostbusters 2. That's a 5 movie. Like it's nothing.
5.5.
That's why I think numerical scores of movies are a little
Yeah, we do.
Wonky
We're doing
because-
our best.
I mean, it's your rating though. You can
Yeah.
Sure.
however you want to quantify
so
it.
I just really didn't enjoy it, but it is a well-made movie. Again, I respect it more than I liked it.
Yeah. All right. So for next week, we will be watching Den of Thieves 1 and Den of Thieves 2. Sorry, not next week. So we'll be convening
Cha-cha, 2 weeks.
on the 11th. So February 11th. We'll be back at it in here. If you guys want, go out and watch
Den of Thieves
1 and 2.
is apparently on Max. Den of Thieves 2 is in theaters.
Yeah, so go enjoy it. Come back. Join us on the pod, on the cast, so you guys can give us your thoughts on things. We'd love to hear
Now,
you.
here's the question. Are we going to watch these 2 movies and be like, yo, that was the same movie twice?
It's possible.
It's a heist movie, so it's possible. Like, yeah.
We'll see.
This
This time we just added a second robber.
They
in
just did the same.
second
It was the same thing, but in a different city.
Yeah, I know Ice Cube's son is in 2.
Did you ever watch Triple X? There's Triple X with
No,
Vin
no,
Diesel.
no.
Then the second Triple X, State of the Union, had Ice Cube in it. Then the third Triple X was back to Vin Diesel.
Without Ice Cube. Oh,
But
Ice
this-
Cube was Vin Diesel. In the second,
No, Ice Cube
essentially.
was Triple X because apparently
Yeah.
it's like an agent name like 007.
yeah.
So
That's so random.
it was such a dumb movie. So there's like an assault on the White House. And so
playing
it's
us
like
off. It's
I
like when
know.
you're doing a speech
and so
at
it's
the
like Ice Cube is with his boys, and there's just this abandoned tank.